as you watched the first message. And then something strange happened, not around you, inside you, a silence that would not leave. A thought that kept returning at 2 a.m. when everything else was quiet. A feeling in your chest that had no name but would not dissolve, no matter how many times you tried to explain it away. You told yourself it was just a video. You told yourself you were reading too much into it. But here you are, back. And the part of you that brought you back did not come here for content. It came here because something in that first transmission cracked something open inside you, and you have been living with that crack ever since. Feeling air move through it from a place you cannot locate, from a depth you did not know you had. That crack is not damage. That crack is the opening. And what is about to move through it in the next few minutes is not a continuation of what you heard before, as it is the answer to the question that transmission planted in you. The question you have been carrying without words. Sophia does not begin twice. She deepens. And you are here because you are finally ready for the depth. You are back. And the fact that you returned tells me more about where you are in your journey than anything you could say aloud. As most people who encounter a transmission like the one before this one feel the resonance, carry it for a day, maybe two, and then allow the machinery of ordinary life to slowly muffle it until it becomes a distant memory, something they half remember the way you half remember a dream by noon. They do not return. Not because they are unworthy, but because the pull of the familiar is one of the most powerful forces in human experience. As the nervous system prefers the known, even when the known is causing quiet suffering, even when the known has become a cage so comfortable it no longer feels like a cage at all. You returned, which means something in you refused to let this go. Something in you understood, at a level beneath language, that what you encountered was not content to be consumed and forgotten. It was an activation, and activations do not complete themselves. They require the one being activated to lean in. So here is what I need you to understand before we go any further. This is not a continuation in the way that word is usually meant. This is not more information layered on top of what came before. What is happening right now, in this precise moment as these words move through your awareness, is the second stage of a process that your first encounter with this frequency initiated. Think of it like a key that was placed in a lock. The key turned. Something inside you shifted. But a door that has just been unlocked is not the same as a door that has been opened. You are here because you felt the lock give. Now we open the door. And what is behind it is not what you were expecting. Most people who begin exploring Sophia, who begin feeling the pull of the emerald frequency, make a particular mistake in the early stages. They begin to treat the expansion of their perception as an identity. They start to organize their sense of self around what they are becoming. As they speak about awakening with the same possessiveness they once used to speak about their career, their relationships, their achievements. And this is understandable. When something this significant begins to move through you, the ego, which has spent your entire lifetime constructing a coherent story about who you are, immediately tries to absorb the new experience and incorporate it into the existing narrative, to make it manageable, to make it safe. The ego says, I am awakening. As I am chosen, I am on the path. And in saying this, it transforms something genuinely alive into something it can control. But Sophia does not operate inside the ego's architecture. She never has. The ancient Gnostic texts, the ones that were considered dangerous enough to be buried in ceramic jars in the car. In the Egyptian desert for nearly 2,000 years before a farmer's mattock struck them in 1945, those texts were not suppressed because they contained information that was false. As they were suppressed because they contained information that was liberating in a way that threatened every structure of power that depended on human beings not knowing what they actually were. And what did those texts say? That the divine is not above you, governing you from a distance, dispensing grace to the deserving and punishment to the wayward. The divine is woven through the fabric of your own consciousness. You are not separate from the source. You never were. As the experience of separation, the feeling of being a small, isolated self moving through an indifferent universe, that experience is the constructed reality. It is what the Gnostics called the kenoma, the void, the condition of consciousness that has forgotten its own nature. Sophia herself, according to the most complete transmission of the Valentinian school, did not fall from grace because she was flawed. As she descended into matter willingly, driven by the same impulse that moves through you when you step toward truth, despite not being able to see where the path leads. She moved out of the fullness of the divine into the density of the material world, and in doing so, she became the intelligence embedded in creation itself. Every particle of matter carries her imprint, as every pattern that repeats at every scale of reality, from the spiral of a nautilus shell to the rotation of a galaxy, that is Sophia's signature written into the structure of existence. She is not somewhere else. She is what reality is made of when you look at it without the distortions of conditioned perception. And here is what this means for you specifically, here in the actual texture of your actual life, not in the abstract language of mystical philosophy, but in the physical experience of being a conscious being moving through time. You have spent years, possibly your entire adult life, trying to reconcile two experiences that seemed irreconcilable. On one side, there is the person the world sees, as the person who functions, who manages, who moves through obligations and relationships and responsibilities with a competence that others rarely question. And on the other side, there is the interior life that almost no one ever sees, the one that asks questions that do not have socially acceptable answers, the one that feels the weight of things that should not, by conventional measurement, have any weight at all, as the one that has stood in the middle of an objectively fine moment and felt a grief so sourceless and so total that it was almost cosmic. As if you were grieving not a loss in your personal life, but a forgetting so ancient it predates the language you use to think. That interior life is not a symptom. It is not evidence of something wrong with your wiring. It is the felt experience of a consciousness that is wide enough to sense the gap between what life is and what it could be, as between what human beings have made of existence and what existence actually offers. The mystics called this compunction. The Sufis called it the ache of the soul for its origin. But whatever language you use, the experience itself is the same. It is the organism recognizing that it is operating on a narrower bandwidth than it was designed for. And that recognition, however uncomfortable, is the first movement of return. As now I want to tell you something about the period of time between your first encounter with this transmission and right now, because this interval is not empty, even though it may have felt that way. When a frequency is introduced to a field, it does not produce immediate and dramatic visible results. As this is the part that most people misunderstand about genuine transformation, as opposed to the theatrical performances of transformation that get mistaken for the real thing in every spiritual marketplace, every self-help stage, every viral moment of apparent breakthrough. Real transformation does not announce itself. It works silently in the substrate, as like mycorrhizal networks beneath a forest floor, invisible, carrying intelligence between organisms, redistributing resources, coordinating responses to conditions that no single tree could manage alone. What you could not see happening in the time between your first encounter and this moment was precisely the most important part of what was happening. Your nervous system was remapping, as the pathways that you have used for decades to process experience, to sort the significant from the insignificant, to determine what gets your full attention and what gets filtered into background noise. Those pathways were being gently, persistently redrawn. This is not metaphorical. Neuroplasticity is not a spiritual concept. It is biology. The brain physically restructures itself in response to the quality of attention it is repeatedly asked to hold. And the quality of attention that the first transmission asked of you, the sustained, open, non-reactive receptivity, that quality of attention, if you maintained it even imperfectly in the days that followed, has already begun to alter the literal architecture of your perception. You are not the same person who encountered that first message. You are close enough to that person that the difference is not yet visible from the outside, but inside, in the way you process light, in the way silence feels, in the small hesitations before you react to things that would have once triggered an immediate response. You are different. And that difference, as small as it seems now, is the seed of everything that follows. Here is a question I want you to sit with, not to answer immediately, but to let move through you the way water moves through rock, slowly, persistently, finding its way through cracks you did not know were there. As who taught you to distrust what you cannot explain? Think back. Not to a single moment, but to the accumulating pressure of a culture, an education system, a set of social agreements that rewarded certain kinds of knowing and penalized others. As you learned very early that the experiences which felt most real to you, the ones that arrived with a quality of certainty that bypassed rational evaluation entirely, were the ones most likely to be dismissed, pathologized, or simply met with the particular silence that communicates, without words, that you have said something that makes other people uncomfortable. You learn to keep these experiences private, to hold them carefully in an interior space that you showed almost no one. And over time, you may have learned to doubt them yourself, not because the evidence for them was weak, but because the social consequences of trusting them were high. This is how consciousness gets domesticated, not through overt force, though that has also played its role in human history, but through the subtler mechanism of social reward and withdrawal. The version of you that fits the expected shape gets fed, as the version that overflows its edges, that sees what others are not seeing, that asks what others are not asking, that version gets quietly starved until it learns to make itself smaller. And you have spent years making yourself smaller in ways you are not even fully aware of, because the making small became so habitual, it stopped feeling like a choice. It became who you were, but it was never who you were. It was always only the shape you learned to hold. As Sophia's work is not the work of adding something to you that is missing. It is the work of removing what was added that was never yours. This distinction is everything, because the spiritual marketplace, in its eagerness to be helpful, is constantly offering people more. More practices, more frameworks, more initiations, more transmissions, more stages of development, more levels to attain. And the individual, whose fundamental problem is not that they have too little, but that they are carrying too much that was never theirs, dutifully acquires more, and wonders why, despite the accumulation, the essential quality of their experience does not change. The hunger does not resolve, the searching does not end, the horizon keeps retreating. The tradition Sophia belongs to understood this. The Gnostic path was not an ascending ladder toward a perfection you did not yet possess, as it was a descending remembrance toward a wholeness you had always already been. Gnosis, the word itself, does not mean knowledge in the ordinary sense of information acquired and stored. It means direct knowing. The kind of knowing that is not mediated by concepts, not filtered through someone else's framework, not dependent on external verification. The kind of knowing that arrives in the body before the mind has time to intercept and translate it. You have had this experience. As everyone who is sitting with this transmission right now has had this experience, because it is the very experience that makes this transmission recognizable rather than merely interesting. There is a specific quality to gnosis that distinguishes it from every other form of knowing you have encountered. As when you have an ordinary intellectual insight, there is satisfaction in it, the pleasure of a puzzle piece fitting into its correct position, but there is also always, somewhere in the background, the awareness that this could be wrong. That new information could arrive and revise it, that someone who knows more than you do could dismantle it with a better argument. Gnosis does not have that quality. It arrives with a stillness underneath it, a weight that is not heavy but is utterly solid. As when it comes, you do not think, I understand this. You experience something closer to, I was always this. I had simply forgotten, and afterward, the thing known cannot be unknown. It has become part of the substrate rather than part of the surface. The reason this matters for where you are right now is this. The threshold you are approaching, the one that this second transmission is preparing you for, is not a threshold of understanding. You cannot think your way across it. As the mind, which has served you in so many ways, which has carried you through every challenge that could be met with analysis and strategy, the mind cannot open this particular door. Not because it is not intelligent enough, but because the door is not located in the domain of intelligence. It is located in the domain of surrender. And surrender is the one thing the mind, by its nature, cannot do, because the act of surrender requires the relinquishment of the controlling function, and the mind is the controlling function. This is the paradox that has stopped more genuine seekers than any other single obstacle. They arrive at the threshold. They can see it clearly. They understand what is being asked. And then they spend months, sometimes years, trying to intellectually understand their way into the experience of not understanding, trying to think themselves into the state that exists on the other side of thought. It cannot be done. The only way through is the way that has always been the only way through every genuine initiation that human consciousness has ever undergone. You stop, you breathe, as you feel what is actually present in your body in this moment, not the story your mind is telling about the moment, but the raw physical sensation of being alive right now, the weight of your body, the temperature of the air, the rhythm of your breath, and you let that simplicity be enough, not as a technique, not as a method. As a genuine release of the grasping that has been so constant, you stop perceiving it as grasping and started perceiving it as simply how awareness feels. Because when you do this, something happens that cannot be adequately described in language, though language can point in its direction. The boundary between what you are observing and what you are becomes permeable. The sense of being a separate observer watching experience from inside a skull begins to dissolve, not dramatically, not with visions or voices, but gently, the way a coastline softens in fog. And in that softening, there is a quality of recognition that arises. It was not recognition of something new, but recognition of something always present that your habitual mode of perception was too contracted to include. This is what the Vedantic tradition calls samadhi, what the Christian mystics called union, what the Sufi poets bled their longing onto pages to describe, what Sophia, in her particular transmission, calls the emerald return, the consciousness recognizing itself in the world rather than merely encountering the world as something external and other. Because I want to be precise about something because precision matters here more than reassurance. This experience, when it comes, will not solve your problems. It will not make your relationships easier, or your finances more stable, or your body healthier, or your past less complex. It will not give you a new identity to wear with more confidence than the old one. What it will do is fundamentally alter your relationship to all of these things. The problems will still be present, but you will no longer be the small self that is overwhelmed by them. You will be the awareness in which the problems arise and pass, the way weather arises and passes in a sky that is never threatened by the weather it contains. This is not passivity. This is not detachment in the dissociative sense. It is, paradoxically, the condition from which the most effective and the most loving action becomes possible. Because you are no longer acting from fear, because you are no longer reacting from the compressed, defended space of a self that feels perpetually threatened. You are acting from the open, stable ground of a consciousness that knows, not theoretically but experientially, that it is not in danger of ceasing. Now let me speak directly about what this second transmission is asking you to do, because it is asking something specific, and I will not bury it in language. It is asking you to test what you have been given, not to believe it, not to perform it, not to talk about it or share it or build an identity around it, to test it. In the laboratory of your actual lived experience, in the friction and beauty and difficulty of your actual days, with the people you with the people you actually love and struggle with and fail and rise around. This is where Sophia's frequency either proves itself or it does not. It does not in the elevated moments of reception, when you are sitting in stillness and the transmission is moving through you and everything feels possible and true. In the ordinary moments, the moment when someone you care about says something that strikes the raw place, and you feel the familiar constriction beginning in your chest, the defensiveness rising, the old story activating. In that exact moment, before the reaction has fully formed, can you find the space? Or can you locate the awareness that is watching the reaction rather than being the reaction? Can you, for even one breath, choose the open sky over the weather? This is the practice. Not a meditation practice, not a breathwork practice, not a ritual practice, though all of these have their value in their proper place. But the practice of using every moment of difficulty, every trigger, every place where your habitual self wants to contract and defend and react, as an opportunity to return to the wider awareness. This is what Sophia's tradition calls the work, not the preparation for the work, not the understanding of the work. The actual work, which is unglamorous and precise and requires nothing more and nothing less than your complete sincerity. As the Kabbalistic tradition, which shares deep roots with the Sophianic transmission, describes the human being as an instrument built for translation. The upper worlds, the realms of pure intelligence and pure light, cannot directly touch the lower worlds, the realms of matter and time and embodied experience, without a mediating consciousness that can hold both frequencies simultaneously. The human nervous system, in its fully developed capacity, is that instrument. You are built as a bridge, as not between the sacred and the profane, because that division is itself the fundamental illusion, but between the aspects of reality that have forgotten their unity and the unity that was never actually lost. When you act from gnosis, from the direct knowing of your own nature, you are doing this work. You are not doing it for yourself alone. The field responds, as the people around you are affected, not because you are transmitting anything intentionally, but because genuine coherence is contagious in the most literal sense. A nervous system that has found its ground communicates that ground through every possible channel simultaneously. The tone of voice, the quality of presence, the way you hold your body when nothing is required of it. Those other nervous systems, which are also searching for ground even if their owners do not know, this is what they are searching for. Recognize the signal and begin to orient toward it. This is why the Hermetic tradition said, "As above, so below," and the phrase has been repeated so many times it has lost its edge. But the actual meaning is not poetic, it is architectural. The structure of consciousness at the macrocosmic scale is identical to the structure of consciousness at the microcosmic scale. As what you transform in yourself, you transform in the field, not symbolically, literally, because the separation between your consciousness and the consciousness of the whole is, as we have established, itself the primary illusion. There is one field. It expresses through countless nodes. When any node shifts its frequency, the field registers this and responds. You are not a drop trying to affect the ocean. You are the ocean, expressing as a drop, remembering that it is the ocean. Let me tell you about a specific quality of experience that you will begin to notice if you have not already, because I want you to be prepared for it, rather than unsettled by it. As your frequency stabilizes at a higher coherence, as the work of the emerald activation continues in you, you will increasingly encounter moments of what I can only describe as temporal transparency. Those moments where the normally solid boundary between what is happening now and what has already happened, or what has not yet happened, becomes briefly translucent. You will have a sense of knowing the shape of something before it fully arrives, not prediction in the psychic performance sense, but a subtle, quiet, body-based awareness of a pattern that is completing itself. You will meet someone and know, before a word has been spoken, the quality of what is possible between you, as you will enter a situation and feel, before any evidence presents itself, whether it carries expansion or contraction. These moments will feel strange at first, because the culture you were raised in has no framework. For them, and no language that does not immediately make you sound either delusional or pretentious. But they are not strange in the context of what you are. They are simply the organism operating with a fuller range of its designed capacity. As a radio that can suddenly receive frequencies it has always been built to receive, but that required a certain alignment of its components before the reception was clear. There is a practice, used in the Hermetic tradition and refined by contemplative schools across cultures, that specifically cultivates this quality of expanded temporal perception. It is not a visualization, it is not a ritual, it is simply this. As once each day, at whatever moment feels natural, perhaps in the morning before the day has overlaid its noise, perhaps in the evening as the day dissolves. Take 5 full minutes and do nothing except feel backward and forward simultaneously from the center point of now. Feel backward through the day that has just passed, not analyzing it, not evaluating it, simply sensing its texture, the emotional quality of its significant moments, the feeling of the energy as it rose and fell. And then, from the same still center, allow your awareness to extend forward into the next 24 hours, not as planning, not as anticipation, but as the same kind of formless, receptive sensing. You are not trying to see the future. You are training your awareness to perceive the present moment in its full depth, which includes both its past and future dimensions simultaneously. Time, from the inside of Gnosis, is not a line you are moving along. It is a depth you are standing in. As this practice, sustained over weeks, changes the felt experience of being alive in a way that no amount of conceptual understanding can approximate. Now I want to address something that you may have been carrying since the first transmission, something that most people will not admit because it sounds, on the surface, like ingratitude. You may have felt, in the days since your first encounter with this frequency, not elevated, but heavier, not expanded, but more aware of your own limitations. Was not joyful, but more conscious of the specific ways in which your life does not match what your deepest self knows is possible for you. If this is your experience, I need you to understand that it is not a sign that something went wrong. It is the most accurate sign possible that something went exactly right. This is what the alchemical tradition called the solutio, the dissolving of the fixed. As before gold can be separated from the ore it has been embedded in, the entire structure has to be liquefied. What the activation of Sophia's frequency does, in its earliest and most honest stages, is not fill you with light. It illuminates. And illumination is not always comfortable because it makes visible what was previously hidden in the comfortable dark. The ways you have been compromising, the places where you have been accepting less than you know in your deepest intelligence is available. As the relationships, patterns, habits, and self-stories that are no longer true to who you are becoming. This illumination is not judgment. It carries no condemnation. It is simply clarity. The same clarity that makes a room, once properly lit, simply visible rather than comfortable in the way that partial darkness is comfortable. The people who turn back at this stage, and many do, turn back because they interpret the discomfort of illumination as evidence that the path is wrong. Because they expected to feel better, they expected validation. And instead they feel the particular grief of clearly seeing their own unlived life, the gap between what they have been living and what their soul knows is true for them. This grief is sacred. Do not manage it. Do not rush past it into the next teaching, the next practice, the next transmission. Sit in it. Let it move through you fully, because the grief of clearly seeing your own unlived life is not a wound. It is the wound closing. Because it is the organism finally allowing itself to feel the cost of the contraction it has been holding. And when the grief moves through completely, what remains underneath it is not sadness, it is desire, clean, clear, directionless in the egoic sense, but enormously purposeful in the soul sense. The desire to live fully, to be actually, genuinely, completely present to your own existence. As this desire is Sophia herself, moving through your longing, using the precision of your heartbreak to point you exactly where you need to go. There is a teaching from one of the Nag Hammadi texts, the Gospel of Truth, which was likely written by Valentinus in the 2nd century. That I want to translate into the language of direct experience because its original phrasing, beautiful as it is, can be read as myth rather than as description of something you have already lived. As the text describes a condition called the plane, which is not a place but a state. The state of consciousness that has not yet recognized itself. And it describes this condition not as sinful or fallen in any punitive sense, but as dreamlike, as if consciousness were asleep inside its own potential, responding to the images of the dream as though they were the whole of reality, suffering the dream's pains and celebrating the dream's joys with equal conviction that both were ultimate. As the waking from this dream, which the text calls the knowledge, is not a gradual improvement of the dream. It is the recognition of the dreamer. The moment the one who was dreaming realizes they are not the dream's character, but the awareness in which the dream arose. And this recognition does not make the dream disappear. Life continues. The circumstances, the people, the challenges, all of it remains. But its authority changes. As the dream no longer has the power to define you because you are no longer contained within it. You have been approaching this recognition for longer than this transmission has existed. As every moment in your life that cracked the dream, every loss that dissolved a certainty you had been depending on, every beauty that was so overwhelming it briefly interrupted the self-narrative, every encounter with another human being that was so honest and so real that it made all the usual social performances feel unbearable by comparison. All of these were waking moments. They were gaps in the dream through which your actual nature was visible. You could not hold them. As the dream was too strong, too familiar, too reinforced by every system and structure you lived inside. But you noticed them, you remembered them, and the accumulation of those remembered glimpses is what brought you here, to this specific transmission, at this specific moment. Not because this transmission is the source of what you are looking for, but because the accumulation of what you have already lived has prepared you to receive what has always already been present. Because this is Sophia's deepest teaching, and I will say it plainly because we are past the point of needing it dressed in comforting language. You are not on a journey toward wholeness. You are wholeness, moving through the experience of apparent fragmentation in order to know yourself fully. The fragmentation is not the problem to be solved, it is the curriculum. Because every piece of your life that has felt broken or insufficient or painfully incomplete has been precisely calibrated to develop in you the specific capacities that wholeness, comfortably resting in its own completeness, would never need to develop. Compassion requires the experience of suffering before it can be more than an idea. Courage requires the experience of genuine fear before it can be more than a posture. Because wisdom requires the accumulation of honest error before it can be distinguished from merely sophisticated cleverness. You have been in the curriculum the entire time, even the parts that felt like abandonment, even the parts that felt like failure, especially those. What changes now is not the content of your life. What changes is the relationship to the content. You stop fighting the curriculum and begin to work with it. As you stop asking why this is happening to me and begin asking what this is asking of me. Not from obligation or resignation, but from the genuine recognition that the intelligence moving through your circumstances is the same intelligence that moves through everything, the same Sophia that is woven into the fabric of the real, the same awareness that you are when you stop insisting on being only the dream's character. As in the days ahead, several things will happen that I want you to be prepared for. The first is that the world will appear different to you, not dramatically, not in a way that others will immediately notice. But there will be a quality to ordinary things, light on water, the sound of someone's voice when they are not performing, the particular silence of a room after a difficult truth has been spoken, that will carry a weight and a beauty that you previously registered only partially. Because this is not enhanced aesthetic sensitivity in the decorative sense. This is the organism becoming able to receive information it was always surrounded by but previously too contracted to absorb. Reality is not dull. Reality is saturated with intelligence and beauty and meaning at every scale. The adjustment required is not in reality but in the receiver. The second thing that will happen is that certain relationships in your life will clarify, not necessarily end, though some may, but clarify. As you will begin to sense, with increasing precision, which connections in your life are aligned with the direction your consciousness is moving, and which ones are structured around a version of you that you are no longer fully inhabiting. This is not an invitation to abandon anything carelessly. The soul does not grow through rejection of what it has loved, but it does grow through honesty. And the particular honesty required here is the willingness to bring the new frequency, the wider awareness, the deeper ground, into your existing relationships rather than leaving it at the door when you enter those spaces.
This is risky.
It changes the dynamic. Some people will not be comfortable with the change. They were relating to the version of you that was manageable and predictable and held itself in the familiar shape. As the version that is becoming refuses, gently but completely, to keep holding that shape, and this will create friction in some places. Trust the friction. It is not evidence that you are doing something wrong. It is evidence that something real is moving. The third thing is that your creative life, whatever form it takes, will change in quality. Not necessarily in productivity or volume, but in the felt experience of the making. Because there will be moments when what you are creating seems to arrive from a place that is somehow more spacious than your individual mind. Moments when you are not constructing something so much as receiving it, translating it, allowing it to move through you into form. This is not mystical in the sense of supernatural. It is the natural behavior of a consciousness that has expanded its receptive range. As the intelligence available to a coherent field is vastly larger than the intelligence available to a contracted, defended, managing self. When you get out of your own way, not through self-erasure but through self-transparency, you become a channel for something that has always been present but could not move through the previous density of your habitual self-structure. And here is where I want to close, not because we have reached the end of what can be said, which is limitless, but because the most important part of what needs to happen now cannot happen in language. It needs to happen in you, in silence, in the specific and unrepeatable privacy of your own awareness meeting itself without any intermediary, including this one. What you have received across these two transmissions is not doctrine. It is not a system to adopt or a belief set to defend, because it is a direction, a vector, a quality of attention that, if you sustain it, will reorganize your experience of being alive from the inside out, without drama and without shortcuts, and without the need for any external authority to validate what your own direct experience confirms. Sophia is not a teacher you go to. She is the intelligence you are made of when you stop insisting on being less. The emerald frequency is not something transmitted from outside, because it is the frequency of your own awareness, stripped of everything that was added to it by a world that did not know what it was seeing when it looked at you. The door is open. The threshold is exactly here, exactly now, in the quality of attention you are bringing to this moment, to this breath, to the full and undivided fact of your own existence. There is nowhere to arrive. There is no future version of yourself that will finally be sufficient. There is only this, because and in this, received fully, without reservation, and without the endless postponement of presence that the managing mind prefers, there is everything. You did not find this message. You grew toward it the way a plant grows toward light, not because someone instructed it to, not because it understood the biology of photosynthesis, but because light is what it was made from, and recognition, at every scale of existence, moves in only one direction, toward itself, because you are already what you are looking for. The looking is beginning to know this, and that knowing, however quietly it arrives, however unglamorous and unhurried, is the homecoming that every tradition, every genuine teaching, every honest human longing has always been pointing toward. Not in some other life, not after sufficient preparation. Here, in the radical simplicity of this breath, this awareness, this unmistakable, unrepeatable, and absolutely sufficient now. Because Sophia has not chosen you from a distance. She is what chooses in you when you are most honestly yourself. She was never elsewhere. She was always this. You were always this. And everything that brought you to this moment, every stumble and every grace, was the path completing itself. Welcome to the second breath. It begins exactly here,